Should the items that were salvaged from the wreck of the SS Titanic ever be sold? That's a question that's on a lot of people's minds at the moment because the company that owns the salvage rights to the ship, that's RMS Titanic Inc., have suggested that they would like to sell about 100 of the artefacts that they have recovered from the ocean bed in auction. And this hasn't happened before. Now, I've been something of a Titanic nerd since I was a little kid. I've previously worked in Titanic tourism here in Belfast. And I have thoughts on this because it's not the first time that this has been mooted as a possibility. Now, in 1912, when the ship went down with the loss of over 1,500 lives, there were family members who managed to keep artefacts from the wreck that night, stuff that they picked up in the ocean as they were kind of being taken away, stuff that they were wearing and carrying themselves. And over the years, a lot of that stuff has turned up at various auctions. Every year there is a major auction over in England where stuff sells for quite a lot of money. And RMS Titanic Inc. managed to acquire the salvage rights to the ship in a couple of years after Robert Ballard discovered the ship in 1985. And since then, the deal has always been that all of the material that was gathered from the shipwreck, that's actually from the seabed itself, not the stuff that was on the ocean surface, but all the stuff that came from the seabed had to be kept together. And it couldn't be sold in any way, shape or form. It always had to be part of the same collection and it could be exhibited. And that's what they've done for years. It's been exhibited around the world. And you may have seen some of their exhibitions. I went all the way to Las Vegas a few years ago to go and see the exhibition that was on in the Luxor Hotel. Yes, I made a complete detour to do that. I am that sad. But it was very interesting and well worth seeing. I worked in Titanic tourism in Belfast for a number of years, and we actually have very little in Belfast that comes from the night of the disaster itself. Very little. Titanic Belfast, which are the kind of the main Titanic museum, have a couple of artifacts on display, but very, very little. And the things that they have came from survivors on the night. It didn't come from the wreck itself. It didn't come from the seabed. A few years ago, there was an attempt to sell some of the stuff, and this went to the courts, and the agreement was that this stuff shouldn't be sold. And the company agreed it would only ever be exhibited. Then in 2018, the sister company of RMS Titanic Inc., Premier Exhibitions, went bankrupt. And as part of the bankruptcy proceedings, in order to salvage the company, they had an attempt to sell off the collection of Titanic ephemera. That's about 6,000 objects. And there was a campaign by the likes of National Geographic, the National Maritime Museums, and Titanic Belfast, backed also by the likes of James Cameron and Robert Ballard, to acquire the collection and bring it here to Northern Ireland. And what they would do then is they would put it on permanent display for people and bring it back to the city where Titanic was actually built. Major campaign, raised millions of dollars in sponsorship in order to do this. And when the moment came, the bid was just ever so slightly shy of the minimum that the courts decided were needed. And in what seems like a very convenient arrangement, a bunch of investors who already had ties to Premier Exhibitions managed to acquire the rights, and since then they've had it. The deal has still remained that the material that was brought up from the seabed from Titanic would be kept together. So now we're coming out and they're asking for permission to, well, they're not even asking for permission. They have suggested that they would like to sell about 100 artifacts. I think the reality of this is they're hoping to do that to raise an awful lot of money. Because Titanic artifacts do regularly go for small fortunes and quite significant fortunes too. But the concern is that this is the beginning of the breakup of the collection, that after all those efforts within the last decade to try and keep that stuff together, when it could have been sold for about $20 million to a bunch of museums who would have ensured that it was kept for the nation and posterity, instead this stuff now risks being put into disparate collectors all over the world at a greatly inflated price, and we will no longer have any access to it. Not a great situation. Now, at the moment, the courts in America are saying this isn't going to be allowed because the deal is that you have to keep this material together. And there is concern amongst the wider Titanic network that this is somehow going to get pushed through and they're going to sell the stuff anyway. And if they start selling this, then there is a risk that they will sell other material from the collection. And this very unique and special collection of items that have all been salvaged from that one ship are going to disappear in the name of profit. And ultimately, that's the real concern, that it's just about the profit and not about the importance of the collection. Even though this is a ship that had people on it from all over the world, 1,500 people died on the night, lots and lots of nations connected to it, lots and lots of people connected to it, rich, poor, everything. And there are very strongly felt moral questions about this. I don't always give my opinions on these things, but I do have my concerns. I sit with those who are concerned that this is going to be the beginning of the breakup of the collection. I don't think that should happen. I think it also would raise the question that, you know, if they're having problems, if they no longer wish to keep the collection as a whole, then perhaps it is time to look at some of those other options and to return to the likes of the National Maritime Museums, and have it sold for museum purposes rather than as a business entity. But unfortunately, this is something that appears to be in the hands of businessmen, and I suspect that things are not going to go the way that many of us would like. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. What do you think? Do you think the collection should be broken up? Do you think that it's right that stuff gets sold off like that? Or because of the situation, should that stuff be kept together? And if you could, would you buy something from that collection? My name is Robert J. Simpson. I am, admittedly, a Titanic nerd, but do keep on following me and for all kinds of weird and interesting things, people, places, and local history.